Coming to you live from deep within icy radioactive wasteland, we are the survivors of the social justice zombie apocalypse. The few, the brave, the bitchy, once more wading into battle against the zombie hordes with Rantzerker number 42. Too long, don't read. Feminism, 8 women in STEM. As you can probably tell from...
Thanks for joining us, everyone. That was great.
Yeah, I totally didn't fumble like multiple times on that one. Yeah, as you can probably tell by the title, I'm joined by TL, and we are going to take on the big thinks. What the frick do I? The big thinks. Where are all the women scientists? Boy, I sense incoming butt hurt. Should we just get stuck right in here?
Well, I think so. I don't think there's anything to add. We've had the TL version, so everyone knows what's going to happen. So it's great. Everything past this point is redundant then, surely.
Yeah, I guess you might as well just sign out and not watch this.
Well, I guess you could do the shilling before we leave.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll do some shilling, and then we'll just forget the whole thing. We are currently doing a fundraiser for covering various men's rights and Gamergate panels. It's if you believe that that's something that needs to happen, that these events don't just disappear down the memory hole or basically end up being defined by mainstream media, then please direct your browsers to feedthebadger.com, where you can support us in our efforts to oppose the media narrative about Gamergate and also people who advocate for men's issues. So thank you for your donations and your kind attention to this matter. Now let's get, do you just want to stop it now? Just like that's it? I've shilled, it's done.
That's normally how we end the stream, so yeah, thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Oh God, all right. No, I think we better do what we said.
We actually have to do the whole thing.
Yes, you actually have to watch this again. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. You will receive the bills from my therapist.
Yeah, I just have to...
You should shill for that as well. Anyone who donates to you, you're paying for my mental health recovery. So thanks for that. Yeah,
well, you know, it's part of the biz, dealing with this craziness. All right, let's just get stuck in. Do you see it? Is everything
good?
All right, let's start.
A powerful leader of the field is not usually a descriptor for a woman. It's oftentimes a woman is
also not usually a descriptor for a man.
Excellent teaching ability and her mentoring, but that's not considered the attribute that.
Okay, I just have to pause that for copyright strike purposes. But did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised you didn't pause it to make the statement. It just sort of sounded like it looked like it froze on the screen, but then kept going. Okay. It was kind of weird.
Let me reverse then.
Is not usually a descriptor for a woman.
Yeah, it's also not usually a descriptor for a man. This is I watched a little bit further into this than I usually do with these Rantzerkers, and I wanted to address this specifically. Most men don't get seen as powerful leaders in their field. Think about it. I mean, how many, if you've ever gone to university, how many of your professors who are male were seen as powerful leaders in their fields? Not many. In fact, many men are seen as cowards, ne'er-do-wells, and deadbeats, although women aren't. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that most of the people who are seen as powerful leaders are men. So I just wanted to insert that little rant there. And do you want to keep going? Do you have anything to add, Teal dear?
No, sounds pretty concise. It just seems like a really weird thing to say. It's just like, oh yeah, men are always seen as leaders. It's like, no, I think you're confusing the fact that a lot of people who are leaders in their field are men with then saying that all men are seen as leaders. You know, these are actually two totally different statements.
Yeah, they are two totally different statements.
But she's just taken the fact that a lot of the leaders and pioneers in a lot of fields happen to be men because men do a lot more risk-taking behavior. They're more likely to put themselves out there and engage in behaviors which are more on the edge of things than women do on aggregate, which is why a lot more leaders and pioneers and things are men. But obviously there are some women, but disproportionately it seems to be more likely men who are doing that. And she's just taken that kind of simple truth and just sort of extrapolated from that, oh, all men are seen as leaders. No, they're not. A true statement and sentiment has gone through one of these feminist wormholes and come out the other side. It's kind of strange, she's been able to do that.
Well, one of the points I was trying to make is that men are seen. They're not just seen as powerful leaders. They're seen as cowards, failures, braggarts. Like, there's all kinds of negative things that men are also seen. And so when she says that men are seen as powerful, or women are not seen as powerful leaders, well, neither are men. And men are seen as a hell of a lot of negative things in many ways that women aren't. And maybe that's part of the reason why there are more male leaders, because they want to avoid being seen as useless. But let's continue.
Oftentimes, a woman is described in terms of her excellent teaching ability and her mentoring.
Okay, I assume this woman is actually a professor at a university, right?
That's I assume so.
Because
I don't actually know who this is.
Yeah, neither do I. But I assume that if she's putting the university is being listed, I assume she's a professor at that university. I really hope they didn't just take a secretary. Oh my.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I'd hope not.
Yeah, so I assume that she is a professor in the neuroscience department at Cornell, I think it was. So this is a professor saying that women are described as mentors and good teachers. Well, maybe your sample size, your anecdotal sample selection is slightly skewed towards women who are supposed to be fulfilling the role of mentor and teacher, and in fact that is their highest aspiration, presumably that's why they are a professor.
Yeah,
that might account for the fact that you're seeing women being described.
Yeah. One thing which I'm going to point out now, and this is something which it also relates to something else which I saw however many months ago that keeps coming up, is when these female professors complain, and the thing which I'm going to reference this to is a study where they said, oh, if people think that your teacher is female or male, they're more likely to rate the male one higher. And the way that they did that was, even when it was a man pretending to be a woman on online teaching courses, they would use words like, caring and nurturing and teaching and all of these. And they just sort of said, oh, well, these are negative things. For some reason, it's like, where is this idea that if a woman is like, a nurturing of a mind, or, caring in their teaching approach, that this is like supposed to be something that's bad?
Well, yeah.
I don't understand how these have suddenly become negative traits for women to have. I mean, I get that this is the feminist approach of like, oh, a patriarchal stereotype because women seen as caregivers, even though that was something that came into society as a result of feminism, as I've covered in some videos that I've done before. But it's bizarre that they just go down this route that if you describe a woman as being caring or in any way nurturing or going the extra mile in giving a shit about other people, that's somehow now bad for some reason.
Well, and the other thing is that I'm sure that many male professors, are also rated as mentoring and good teachers, or hopefully. So I don't think it's an insult, especially when your chosen profession is about teaching and mentoring, to be described as a teacher and a mentor.
Yeah, it's kind of like exactly what you should be going for.
Yeah, it's exactly so essentially what she's complaining about is that women in teaching and mentoring are being described as teachers and mentors.
Yes.
Unless she's referring to women in the general population who are in part of STEM, which I really question if that's how they're described. I mean, is this a result of a survey? I seriously doubt that she took a survey. I don't think her opinion was subject to any kind of scientific rigor. Like, she did a survey of women out in the STEM field and how people define them.
Oh, yeah, but I think then even that's kind of, a bit of a bullshit cop out, even if they did do something like that, because it's okay. So if this was a survey from women in the STEM field and they're still being described as like being good teachers, because it depends how it works, in what sort of research you're working, but generally, when you work in a place doing research, you'll only work there for however many months or however many years. You get sort of taken on into a company for a period of time, and then you can either be refreshed at the end of that, or you have to go off and find a different research department to work at. And obviously, if you are particularly invested in that project, as in it's something that you've continued doing, as in it's come over from, say, your doctorate or something like that, then people often have like a very vested personal interest in that topic. So if you're doing something that's of personal vested interest to you, and you're planning on either coming back to that topic at that same research center like next year or something like that, or you're going to be taking it somewhere else with you, and you're working with those people, because obviously many people will often collaborate together on one research project, maybe that's just a sign that those women actually really give a shit about the thing that they're working on. And they're like, oh, you're coming in to take my place on this research thing. I'm going to go over to this institute over here, do something else, but I'm going to come back to this, or I'm going to liaise with you on this from afar. Let me tell you everything that I know. Why is this a bad thing?
It isn't.
If that's what's happening, then this just shows that women in STEM are actually giving a shit about their jobs, which is good.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that is happening is, like I said, most men aren't described as powerful leaders in their field. I bet the vast majority of men who are described in positive terms in STEM are described more in, collaborative, good team worker, mentor, teacher, especially if they're a professor. I mean, so it's right now, right off the bat, your complaint is strange. It's strange. You're making a lot out of very little. Let's banana this.
But that's not considered the attribute that leads to leadership and scientific advances.
It's not considered the attribute. So teaching and mentorship is not considered the attribute that leads to
scientific advances
and scientific advancements. But okay, I'm going to get stuck in on one particular angle, and I'll definitely be curious to see your point of view on the angle I take, Taylor. She's actually, in what she's just said, she has created a proposal, which is that the way women are viewed by the people around them is how what they will eventually achieve. So if women were viewed as leaders, women as an entire group, like not just like men, where some men become leaders, but women as an entire group would become leaders. So in other words, what women do and what women achieve is exactly one-to-one correspondence with how they're viewed by other people, which strikes me as excuse me, but it strikes me as a very feminine way of viewing this situation. Because generally, the people who really did create innovations were not necessarily viewed in a positive way while they were doing it. Because innovation requires a lot of stuff that, you have to be by yourself. You have to be uncompromising about stuff. You gotta just be totally monomaniacal about your vision. I mean, look at Steve Jobs. He's seen as an innovator, wrongly or rightly, and he's not seen as a nurturing or mentoring person, but he was seen even negatively by people while he was innovating. And he had several failures before he got it right. And he was definitely, people viewed him when he had those failures in very negative ways. And yet he still rose up and created something, despite how he was being viewed. And yet this particular woman is advancing the notion that the way that women are viewed is instrumental, perhaps even the most vital variable in their possible achievement, when this is obviously not true for men. All kinds of men throughout history who've achieved stuff were pariahs, or they were seen as weird loners, or they were, I don't know, burnt at the stake. They were viewed really negatively, and yet they still made their achievements. So why is it that how women are viewed is so essential to women's achievement, and yet how men are viewed is so incidental to their achievement? Because she is actually advancing a notion that I would say is really toxic. And it's that this idea that somehow people's eyes determine what women are. And that's not true. It's women's actions that determine what women are, not other people's eyes, not what other people, how other people look and see women. And it's this very notion that I wonder is really, really actually detrimental to women who want to create innovation. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of female innovators are just going to do it anyway. But this idea that she's putting in girls' heads that they have to fight to be seen in a particular way. They have to fight to be seen as leaders before they can be leaders. Well, that's not how it works. It's not how it ever has worked. And it really sounds like you're presenting this whole situation in a very limited, very vain, very narcissistic way. That everything is about how you're seen instead of what you do. And how people see you is essentially going to be what you do. So if everybody popped out tomorrow and said, oh yes, I see women as leaders, every single woman on earth would become a leader. Unlike for men, which is only a very small percentage do. But did you want to add anything to that, Tiltier? I know it wasn't very concise.
No, that does actually sound kind of like where she's sort of leading with this. It is this bizarre thing that we constantly hear that, oh, in order for women to achieve something, they have to be seen as in a certain way. So, oh, don't call them bossy because that will destroy their confidence or something like that. No, if you call a girl bossy and she wants to do something, she's still going to do it.
Well, it's this conception that the way people view girls and women is exactly what girls and women will end up being. Which doesn't make any goddamn... In fact, advancing this notion is probably the worst idea about men or girls and women. It's probably the worst thing you could tell girls and women or advance about them. Instead,
yeah. This idea that other people define what you're going to be by their expectation of you.
Yeah.
It's quite dangerous.
It is extremely dangerous. And this is like... This is for anybody who's watching this and who's actually concerned about women and girls in STEM, stuff like this is going to make the situation far, far worse. Like it's not helpful. It's not helpful to women or girls. At this point, I don't know if it might be just neutral to men. I mean, telling guys that they have the power through their eyeballs to determine, you know, I don't know, if a man says all women are pink mushrooms, they suddenly poof, bam, that's what they are. That's quite the allegation, or the alleging, or the thesis. I don't know what to call it. Shall we, Banana?
We shall.
I like working with men.
I just want to say this. I have a black friend. My black friend's name is Nigel. He's not like, he's a really nice guy. He's not like the other blacks.
I was raised with brothers. I have no sisters. My laboratory, for example, is a very consensus-driven, collaborative laboratory.
So what you were saying is that your laboratory is very mentoring and teacher-like.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It is not a traditional sort of male organized structure.
Okay. I mean, she isn't alluding to the idea that it's negative, that it's male organized.
What I find interesting here is that she seems to just be sort of implying that anything that involves hierarchy is inherently masculine or male in this way. Because that's sort of generally how a lot of labs will operate. You'll have like research teams and they'll report to one overseeing doctor who will be part of sort of part of a research group, and then they'll go up and up and up in a sort of chain like that. And she seems to be suggesting that her lab doesn't work like that. It's sort of
Lateral.
it's yeah. She seems to be painting her lab as this like anarchist Marxist, sort of like no, we're all on an equal playing field, and we all voluntarily collaborate with each other, and all of our opinions and views are all equally of worth and things like really. So you have no chain of hierarchy at all in your no, you do, you absolutely do. I think it's just that she doesn't think that that's how it is, or she's trying to avoid that. But it's just kind of weird that she seems to inherently attach this idea that any sort of hierarchy thing is like a traditionally masculine thing,
Well,
which is not really the case. If you consider any, if we take this into the political sphere, which we're going to have to, pretty much all of the political ideas and economic ideas which move away from hierarchical means of doing things have all been pushed by men. So the vast majority of them have been pushed by men. And I suppose we should point out now that if you do want to look at this horizontal worker cooperative way of doing things, which you can get either in like Marxism or in anarchism, they can be totally separate, or they can work together because politics is like that, and you can pick and choose and da 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 da. I'm not going to go into details with all of them because I'd be here forever. But yeah, these are things which you often find being promoted more by men than by women. So this idea that it's like, oh, anything with a hierarchy is like inherently male or traditionally masculine is bizarre.
well,
But again, maybe that goes back to how we were saying earlier that no, men are the ones who tend to do the sort of weird going to push out there and do the weird shit first. I mean, you consider someone like Karl Marx and the Frankfurt School and all of his, oh, everything must be a division of labor horizontally and so on and so forth. In his time, he was a drunk roaming around, spending all of his time in bars and other people's money getting hammered, and everyone thought he was a complete fucking joke. And now, however many years later, people have come back and it's like, oh, this guy who never worked anything, never ran an organization, never actually ran a company, never even really had a job, had a lot of really solid ideas about economics somehow.
Yeah, I wanted to say during this, just leaving the subject of Marx,
Yeah.
but he's that whole scenario of a guy who's ostracized from society, creating an innovation on his own is very common throughout history. The other thing I wanted to remark upon is her notion of her situation being non-hierarchical. There are other forms of non-hierarchical organization. For example, warlords in a territory. So they have a whole bunch of warlords in a large territory. It's non-hierarchical because nobody's the boss. And if anybody invades the territory, the warlords will go and kick them out. But they still go back to warring with each other in this non-hierarchical lateral situation. It doesn't make it any more moral.
Aren't they still hierarchy? If you have a warlord like that, they are still hierarchies within one area. Like you'd have a geographical country, but you'd have a series of warlords with individual territories. Now, those warlords would still be a hierarchy of power. It's just that there would be no one absolute pinnacle.
Yeah, but it's still, if you look at the warlord level, it's lateral.
Oh yeah, because they'll often form alliances and whatnot with each other, but there's still hierarchy underneath them because it's a system that's ultimately feudal, which is a hierarchical system in that.
Well, it can be fairly flat if they're just like tribes, but what I'm getting at is at the warlord level, it's non-hierarchical. I mean, maybe below it is hierarchical, but the warlord model is about a bunch of people coming together to carve out resources. And what I found is that women are like warlords. They come together, they converge on an area, and they carve out resources. And they call that a more moral, more lateral system. No, it's not. It's just a system of people who can't work together. who see everything in terms of the resources they can grab rather than the resources they can create by working together. The lack of hierarchy there isn't actually an increased morality. It's a lack of inability to work together. And that's what I've seen a lot with women's workplaces. They may not have no one, there may be, or usually there's one person on the top, but for the most part it's flat. Everybody has their territory. They don't work together very well because they have to negotiate the territory before they can negotiate the tasks. And they can't do something like okay, Sally, you do task B, Andrea, you do task A, Sue, you do task C or Z, and then come together at the end and we'll all get something out of this. It's extremely difficult for women to do that because in the process, they think they're being used. It's a mindset. When they do this one task, it's supposed to come all together. In the end, everybody benefits. A lot of women doing that one task will think that they're being used, even though it's just one task in a process to create something that will benefit everyone. Men don't. Men don't think that way. They can understand, oh, hey, I got to do this task. Joe over there is doing that task. Jeff over there is doing that task. And when it comes together, we will have created something bigger than the sum of its parts. Women hate that. And this is my general observation about women in workplaces. They hate the idea that they could just be a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's why I say they use the warlord model. Warlords also hate the idea they could just be a part of something bigger than themselves. That's why when you see a territory that is ruled by warlords, you don't have a nation state. You don't have an empire. You just have a bunch of people lording it over smaller people underneath them and not allowing for the idea that anything could be bigger than themselves. And this is what I've seen in this so-called collaborative workplaces of women. And in this case, I would say that, yes, there is a hierarchy. She is most likely the biggest, fattest warlord on the prowl. And she is the one who determines the mood, the attitude, who is in favor, who is out of favor. But there's one additional thing. While being the biggest, fattest warlord on the prowl, she doesn't want to have to take responsibility for her decisions. So not only does she make the decisions, and no doubt she does make the decisions, and they filter down to her peons, her peons have to actually take responsibility for the things that she's chosen they should do. And that's a long rant. But you know what? I could be completely wrong about this woman. It's just something that I get when I hear women talk about, a particular woman talk about how women are collaborative and shit like that. And there's no hierarchy. Usually there is a hierarchy, and she's on the top of it. But the reason why she doesn't think there's a hierarchy is because not only does she basically tell people what to do, she makes them take responsibility for the things she told them what to do. So they need to be happy about it. She's like, Gregory, go make me a coffee. No, she won't say that. Would you please make me a coffee and be happy about it? And then also, take responsibility for having made me a coffee. I'm using coffee as like just a really simple analysis. So basically she's creating this perception that she's not in a hierarchical space because she's insisting, she's so fucking on top of everything. She's insisting that not only people do what they tell her to, but that they take responsible for having done so and that they enjoy it. And she thinks that means that they're actually doing it of their own free will. But you know what? She could be completely the nicest human being on the planet. I don't know. That's just my impressions.
Sounds about right, because I've never heard of any sort of research environment where everything is completely horizontal.
Mm-hmm. Ever.
And being able to appreciate those differences and value them, I think, is a very important part of the advancement of our science.
Okay. Something occurs to me, and I'm sorry if I'm sucking all the air out of this, Teal there. Something occurs to me when I listen to this. She says her space is collaborative and lateral, basically. Does she realize that those are two features that are not really a part of being a leader? Being a leader requires some form of hierarchy, at least some form of actual formal hierarchy where you take responsibility for stuff, not just abdicate responsibility for the people underneath you while making all the decisions. So what she's saying is my space is totally leaderless, and yet I'm not seen as a leader. Why is this? How could this be? Because I'm a woman? And then she allows that there could be, it could be good that people approach these things differently. I just find that funny. You're still here, deal there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just sort of thinking about, I'm just sort of taking that and bandying it around in my head a little bit. I'm sort of just trying to think, like, is there a way that you could have something that's totally horizontally cooperative and still have leaders? Yes, you could. You wouldn't necessarily need a strictly formal hierarchy with an unequal division of power and duty to do that. The reason for that is you would have someone where you would have a situation in total horizontal, say a totally horizontally divided workspace where everyone was sort of equally deemed to be of importance and whatever, but you could still be a leader in that situation insofar as you could be a social leader. So there wouldn't be so there wouldn't be one pinnacle person who says, right, you're going to go and do this, you're going to go and do this, you're going to go and do this. It would be someone who would be an informal leader. It would just be someone whose opinion on something was generally considered to be better than other people's because they had more experience doing something. And in that sense, if you had a group and you were doing different tasks, then different people would be not leaders, but their opinion would carry more weight across that horizontal. So there wouldn't be one ever definitive leader or one ever definitive group of leaders. The sort of leadership role would flow according to what task was being done. That's the only sort of thing I can think of, but that's just me going off on something completely unrelated in my mind, just because.
Yeah. It was just basically a throwaway comment. My space is collaborative and leaderless, but I don't know why I'm not being seen as a leader.
Yeah, and it's for that reason. It's because if you have no formal hierarchy and you are not on the top of that formal hierarchy, then you're not going to be a leader because you have no more power than anyone else. So in that situation, you could only be a socially cooperative leader, whereby you would have to have something that meant other people would use their equal share of power to back something that you were saying or something that you were doing because they thought what you said or did had more merit. So in other words, if you are actually in a genuine total horizontal plane of power where everyone has an equal amount of say in anything and your opinion is not being given any more relevance compared to anyone else's, that's because your opinion and your view or your research or anything that you're bringing is not persuading anyone, which means you're doing it wrong. You're just not as good as someone else, if that's the case. So if that's the case and everyone does have equal power and you're not being seen as a leader, it's because you're actually just not a leader. You're not good enough to be one, even on a social, I'm just going to have this opinion and back it up with this thing so other people will want to back it setting.
I have to concur. Okay, banana. Actually,
that being said,
that being said, I just had to pause it because I sense the butt hurt is going to happen now. I sense somehow this is going to turn. I feel like she's backing up the garbage truck full of butt hurt, and it's about to disgorge all over us. I could be wrong.
I have no
beep 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 beep.
No hesitation.
Beep 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 beep.
In
beep beep beep. Okay.
Experiences of pretty extraordinary discrimination.
Oh my God. Oh. You know what? I actually did not know before she said that it was going to go there. It was actually a prediction. Well, it's always right, isn't it?
And these types of discrimination events are benign.
I like how she's going into the hurt like the way the tempo and how she's talking changes. She's looking down like she's been hurt and recalling something very, very painful. And yet she says that these instances of extreme discrimination are benign. Okay. All right.
Right.
So,
just before we go anywhere, echoes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. There we go. No echoes. Okay. Yeah, this idea is okay. So I'm not in a leadership role. Okay, that's fine. We've established that you think that your research department is a purely horizontal worker-driven collaboration. We all know that you're lying, but we're going to pretend that you're right somehow. And your complaint now is that you are not seen as a leader because, well, you can't be a leader in the formal sense. You would have to be a social leader. You would have to have something that in certain circumstances would mean that your opinion or your position had more evidence or more credence for people to take you seriously. But now you're saying, well, no, I'm going to call out discrimination. So now you're basically, she's going down the exact route of, I am not seen even as a social leader because discrimination. She's completely absolving herself of her own personal responsibility in this. It can't be, I'm not a leader simply because I'm not good enough at what I'm doing to be a social leader in this supposed horizontal worker collaboration that we totally have honest guys. She's just absolving herself from any responsibility in this. It's bizarre. I'm done. You can unmute yourself and come back now.
Sorry about that, guys. What I was saying was that I think okay, so she essentially says that women are described as mentors and teachers, which are positive roles for women, or anyone. And then she's coming back and saying that she has been personally discriminated against. What does she mean? That women are seen in X positive way and men are seen in X positive way. But she's saying that men and women bring different things to the table. She specifically said that there are differences and that men and women will approach something differently. And now she's saying that she's discriminated against because people pick out the positives that women approach science with, and they say that women have those positives and that men have different positives. It seems really jumbled what the hell she's saying, to the point where I wonder if even what she's saying is the point. Because maybe the point is this affectation of victimhood. I don't know. I mean, when we tell these emotional stories, they tend to stick in people's minds much more powerfully. I mean, after all, how she's acting doesn't really, it's a little bit dissonant with what she's saying. Let's go through it again. Because she looks like she's recounting something very painful, but yet
events are benign.
Look at the way she says benign. She's saying it like 20 years ago I watched my grandma die. And it's like it's a painful memory, but I'm going to describe it as benign as I demonstrate physically this idea that I'm going through some sort of psychic pain. I don't know. It just seems weird.
The thing is, I don't really get how she can say that you're having like benign discrimination.
Let's see.
I mean, benign. I get like benign discrimination would be positive discrimination, which would be something in your favor, surely, because the basic meaning of the word benign. Or is this the whole chivalry sexism thing?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna see what she has to say after she says it was benign.
In that they're not intentional.
Okay, so the discrimination is benign in that it's non-intentional. That doesn't make sense. And cancer is often unintentional, but it's rarely benign. So how does so men are just doing this just by accident? It feels like she wants to assert something very negative, but not take responsibility for being mean. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, I did, or unless you wanted to say something to that, Teal there.
No, it's just bizarre. It's like, no, it's benign sexism, but they don't know they're doing it. So men don't know that they're being nice, but in a sexist. So what? This kind of sounds like gynocentrism to me. It's like men don't know that they're being really nice to women, but they're being really nice to women, and somehow that's bad for them.
Well, no, I think she's saying that the discrimination. I don't know if she's saying the discrimination is negative. Well, no, she must be saying the discrimination is negative.
Well, it's negative in that it's positive and therefore negative. You know, like if you're like really kind to a child and you give them everything that they want, they end up as a spoilt brat who has really, really thin skin and can't actually handle the real world. You were kind, but you damaged them.
I don't think that's what she's getting at. I think she is saying that discrimination is bad, but she's saying because men are not doing it intentionally, it's benign. Personally, I think she's trying to grope towards some sort of victim narrative, which advancing the idea, if you wanted to remove women from STEM, advancing the idea that they are victims of that culture seems to me the best way to do it. But, you know, and maybe we should be careful before we advance unsourced claims of victimhood towards women, thus warding them away from certain groups of people. I mean, maybe we should be careful about that, about advancing unsubstantiated claims of female victimhood. But I guess, you know, that's fine.
Well, we'll come to that one a little bit later, I'm sure, with our actual research and citations.
Yay!
Probabilistic.
What?
9, in that they're not intentional, but they're probabilistic.
What the fuck does what? What? Okay, so this discrimination by her male colleagues is benign in that it's not intentional, but it's probabilistic. What the fuck does that mean? Like, did you have any idea?
No. So it's benign, unintentional, but it's probably going to happen. It has a higher chance of happening. What?
What happened?
I don't know. This doesn't seem to be a sentence in English.
Yeah, it does.
It's like, I understand all of the words that you're saying, but how you're saying them, the sentence that you've built out of them, doesn't make sense.
That's
this is like that. You know what is that internet sentence that goes around? That's like the joke question: how can you probably, because do you look like, or something? It's like all of these words make sense, but in this particular order, it looks like it kind of means something, but it's actually gibberish.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, because she's basically speaking gibberish. I wonder if the payload isn't what she's saying, but what she's emoting. And what she's emoting is, I am a woman scientist who's been hurt by my field. I can't actually articulate how I was hurt or even make any sense in the process of creating a possible fictional hurt. But I'm just going to spew some gibberish while looking downtrodden, and that should be enough. This doesn't seem very big think. It seems more like big sink. No, it's all right. Bad. Okay, banana.
That means that at every single decision point that a woman scientist has, she's a little bit, just a little bit, more vulnerable than a compro male colleague.
Oh, for fuck you! Look at this! Okay, this is the payload. Women, get back to your role as victims. You're more vulnerable. And this is challenging stereotypes? How the what?
You're more vulnerable every single time you make a decision But the thing is, I don't echoes.
Oh shit! Sorry.
It's fine. Okay, right. So I don't understand the null in the hypothesis here. It's like, okay, you've come to your conclusion that, okay, at any single time a woman makes a decision, she is somehow more vulnerable in making that decision. How, I don't know. And I don't understand the original point of the, what is the original point of the hypothesis here? It's the gibberish sentence that means nothing. The women are victims of benign, what was it? Benign sexism that's probabilistic or something. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, it is bizarre, and I think that this is the ultimate payload. She's essentially just reasserting women's role as victims, as vulnerable, as weaker. And what really pisses me off is these individuals never take responsibility for what they're doing. Simultaneously, they're saying, oh, we empower women. By advancing unproven and unsubstantiated allegations of women's victimhood by various groups of people, they're empowering women. By saying women are always more vulnerable than men, they're empowering women. By saying women are constant victims, they're empowering women. Like, seriously. I wish they would just own their shit. Of course, I guess if they did, they wouldn't be able to get away with it. Because this is what it really is. This is the payload. She is establishing these gender roles. Women vulnerable, men invulnerable. Women vulnerable, men invulnerable. And then they turn around and say that's radically new gender roles. Thinking about gender roles. Right. Yeah. Anyway, banana. Unless you have something to say.
Banana.
And when we look at the numbers, they cry for an explanation.
You want to look at some numbers, do you? Oh yes. Oh yes. Let's look at some numbers and provide some explanations, shall we?
Yeah!
This is where the fun begins.
Okay.
Oh,
right.
Come into my domain and play by my rules now, with my evidence and my citations. Oh, the fun begins.
Okay, here we go.
Sorry, I got a little excited there.
All right, so here's the article that you told me to link to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's bachelor's to PhD STEM pipeline no longer leaks more women than men, a 30-year analysis. That doesn't sound, that sounds very, so tell us a bit about this article, because that title seems like it might be misleading, but maybe it isn't.
Okay, basically what they've done is they've looked at the number of women who get doctorate degrees, the number of women who get PhD degrees, specifically in any sort of STEM field. And over 30 years, they have just plotted how many of them are getting those degrees, pretty much.
Okay.
Because the idea was that the STEM pipeline was that if women got a degree in it, they wouldn't then go on to get a PhD and so on and so forth. That's the leaking that they're talking about, that women would do the bachelor's, do the master's, but then not go on to like full doctorate level.
Okay.
And what we found over the 30 years is that that's not actually the case. But more interestingly, and most interestingly in regards to this, is when we start looking at, I believe it's figure 2 in this article. Let's see if I can
I got table
see
1.
it on my screen.
Figure 2 is right here. There you go.
Not
You see that?
figure 2. It might not be figure 2. There is one of these that is basically just a timeline. Oh, I think it's figure 3, actually.
Okay, all right. What I wanted to say about the title, is I think it's slightly misleading, because what they're saying, and what's really interesting is because whenever I do research into these matters with these particular groups of people who are advancing this idea of female victimhood, whenever they make a mistake in their research, it's always in terms of inflating female victimhood. And what I find interesting about that title in this particular article, that it is because bachelor's to PhD STEM pipeline no longer leaks more women than men. What's actually happened is fewer women are getting bachelors in STEM fields. So what they're casting the fact that fewer women are getting bachelors in STEM fields now than they were 30 years ago as a positive, which is a completely different thing than I've seen ever before by these groups of people. Usually they will advance anything in terms of female victimhood, but suddenly they've reversed with this, and now they're presenting this as not female victimhood, the fact that women are getting far fewer bachelors now in STEM than they did 30 years ago. They're presenting it in the most positive light, and I just find that curious.
It's positive because there's more women. Like 30 years ago, lots of women would get like a basic degree in it, but they wouldn't go on to the doctorate, and that disparity was seen as a bad thing. But now that there's just fewer women getting the doctorate, like there's basically still almost the same number of women doing PhDs. It's come down a bit, but it just means that there's less women doing the basic degrees.
Okay,
so in essence, there's less women quitting.
Well, okay, here's the thing.
Even though the total number of doctorates is only marginally lower.
They've taken the fact that women are doing less bachelors, less masters, and less PhDs in STEM, and they have spun it in the most positive way to prevent us making the conclusion that women are victims as possible. And they never do this. Like the people who are gung-ho about women's, or talk about being feminists and want to get equality and all this shit, they never spin things to decrease women's victimhood. And yet here they have. That's what I'm pointing out.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. So
that's really like raising red flags for me.
Well, I just like this one because it's pure numbers. So if you head on over to figure 3, you just look at the number of women and the number of men.
Okay.
Men are holding the constant time after the bachelor. So as you can see, men and women are getting these degrees. There is a difference between them. There's a slight uptake for women in 1995, and it comes down throughout the 90s to the thousands. More interestingly, though, is figure 4, which is women's actual representation in STEM.
Okay,
so what you'll see is a percentage of women among STEM degrees, and you'll see the years along the bottom. So what we've seen is a steady increase, and it was increasing all the way up, and it peaked in about 2000, and then it's just started coming down. So what you'll notice is there's less women doing bachelors, which is the lower level of qualification, but the number of PhDs has still steadily increased. And this is what this entire thing is basically talking about. Like there was a number of women who would do the bachelors but not go on to do the PhDs, and now what we do is we're seeing that basically we've got more people going on to do PhDs relative to bachelors now, which is good because it means more women are doing the higher end of things. So what we're now contending with is this idea that we need like more women in STEM, and yet we've got a massive number of women in STEM here, like a shitload of women in STEM. But what's most interesting is that when you consider looking at the 90s to 2000s, which is about the time third wave feminism starts, notice anything about the peaks and how the peaks have come down since feminism, since the major hit of third wave feminism has been coming in.
Yeah. I actually have a slightly different theory about this, but it's based on different numbers. So, but I do see that, which is interesting. And the thing is that the number of PhDs can't sustain at the level that it is. In fact, I would imagine that this is just an artifact of the time span. I imagine that the peak in bachelor's degree followed by the peak in PhDs could be just the fact that it takes a certain amount of time to get a PhD.
Yeah, it's typically, it depends what you're getting a PhD in, but you're generally going to be looking sort of 5-6 years, depending.
Exactly what you see. The difference.
So, and obviously bachelors typically depending on what you're doing, if you're in STEM, you might actually also be looking at 4 to 5 years for
Okay.
some bachelor's degrees, and PhDs in certain STEM fields, you can go a little bit more. So actually the peak intake is probably about 5 years before the actual peaks. So you're looking about the mid 90s and early 2000s for both of those peaks.
But what I'm saying is that if the bachelor's peaked and then go down, it's likely that the PhD will as well at some point.
It will, yes.
All right. So it's likely that the PhD line will follow the bachelor line in about now, actually. So
yeah, we're going to start seeing it now.
Okay, I want to just see what exactly, how do they define the term P-STEM? Is that PhD STEM? That's probably what it means.
No, I think it's just the P number for STEM, I think.
Okay. Well, what I want to show now is this graph. This is what happened to women in computer science. Now, STEM covers more than just computer science. It also covers mathematics, technology, and engineering. If you look at the red line in this graph, can you see this, Teal dear?
I can.
You can see that it's fairly low, but prior to the 1970s, then it started to peak, to go up between the 70s and it actually peaked in 1983. And then since then, it's been declining steadily to the point where it's almost at where it was prior to the 70s. So this red line indicates where women have been in computer science, which is, I think, the biggest push right now is for women to get women in computer science. And when we started to see this drain out of computer science is in 1983. That's when women seemed to start to leave it as a field, and which is really interesting. Now, this is completely anecdotal, but I was talking to Tilder about this before we started the show. My father was, my mother was big into feminism in the late 70s and the early 80s, or throughout the 70s. And my father sort of took part in those events as well, to a degree. And he said, when I talked to him about some of these concepts, he's not really into any of this really, but he said that when he was involved in these groups and during that time period, things like male privilege and patriarchy and women being oppressed throughout history were not mainstream concepts. They were radical concepts. Now, if you ask people on the street, if you just randomly pick someone on the street and say, do you believe that women were oppressed throughout history? Chances are they'll say yes. Do you believe that we live in a patriarchy? Chances are they'll say yes. Do you believe that men have privilege? They may say, no, I'm not a feminist, but they actually agree with those initially radical feminist concepts of patriarchy, male privilege, and women being oppressed throughout history. And so if you look at 1983, if I just right here, prior to that's when those concepts were starting to become more and more popular because of the feminist push, not just into general society, but also into academia. So that's when people were starting to believe that women were victims of society. Now, the question is, why is it that this line, why is it that women ended up getting into STEM, into computer science after like the mid 60s, that they started to get into it very, very, very highly? When I look back, and this is just theory. I'm just advancing, actually hypothesis, not even theory. I'm just advancing this as a hypothesis. When I look back at the 50s and the Cold War, there was a lot of commercials trying to get young people into the sciences as a way of trying to compete with the Russians, with the Soviets, with the communists. And so science was framed as almost like a civic duty. And when you look at those videos from that time period, there were women scientists in those videos. They were trying to get women and girls involved as well. Not the way that feminists do, by making it out that women are victims of all of the fields and the groups that feminists presumably want women to be involved with, but by showing women just competently going about their business as scientists, as engineers, as mathematicians, as computer scientists. They were just, it was completely unremarkable. They were just doing their thing, their civic duty to compete with the Russians. And that might be that presentation of women just doing that science is just a professional field occupied by professionals might be why we see that upward curve there between the 60s and the mid 80s. And then for whatever reason, computer science took the hit. Now, physical science, law school, medical school, those are quite a bit different. But so the question really becomes, like I said, in my hypothesis, what happened in 1983? That's when the tipping point was. What happened?
That is for computer science, yes. I would say quickly, can you pull up a figure 2?
Okay,
again?
From yours?
Yeah, please.
I believe this is.
No, it's the one with the 5 on one of them.
Okay, just give me a second. I'll load it up from.
There you go. Yeah. So obviously, you were talking about computer science here. What's interesting is this graph kind of shows another sort of quite interesting trend. Obviously, you've got the timelines on the bottom here. I find it kind of weird that they didn't put the dates on all of the graphs, but all of the lines on the bottom correlate with the dates on the very bottom graphs for some reason. I don't know why they've laid it out like this. But what you'll see is actually women hold generally fairly steady throughout the 70s, 80s. They increase often throughout the sort of 80s and 90s in a lot of them. Engineering in general seemed to take a big hit between the 70s to the 80s and then started coming up again. Physical science has just basically been a near constant up and up. But what's really interesting is look on every single one of those, the last 2 points from the 90s to 2000s. Every single one of them is down.
Mm-hmm.
And what year did third wave feminism come in?
Yeah, exactly.
The first documented use of the term third wave feminism was from Ms. Magazine in 1992, which means the sentiments of third wave feminism must have presumably been around for a few years beforehand in order for there to basically be enough reason to differentiate it from the current brand of feminism.
Mm-hmm.
How very fascinating. Because third wave feminism, as you pointed out, is the one which is, women are victims. Everything is patriarchy. And those sort of radical notions, which your father was talking about from the sort of 80s and 90s, has by now grown up into women who are now in their 30s, 40s, the positions of power, starting to push all of these things into the women's studies courses, which started happening in the 60s. They've now become the professors of these things, and look what happens in the 90s by the time they're there and starting to spread that message into the mainstream.
What I would say is this is statistics on PhDs. What I was looking at was statistics on all the degrees. PhDs probably are not going to have as much variability. Simply
no, because there's not very many people doing them, but they are the highest echelon of achievement.
Well, at least in academics.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not going to see as much, but if I'm right about that, and I'll pick up the one that I was looking at. I just need to got a little bit too many figures going on here. If I'm right about this peak, where it peaked in 2000, the degrees, the bachelor's degrees, and again, this is all sort of combined together. So we're looking at science, engineering, mathematics, everything combined together in these. Whereas I was just looking at computer science.
Yeah.
If we see this peak in bachelor's degrees in about 2000, followed by a peak in PhDs, we're probably going to soon see a decline in PhDs in women as well.
Yeah.
So,
I guarantee in the 2020s, the big issue is going to be female STEM PhDs are down. I guarantee it. Probably a little bit sooner. We might start seeing it. I mean, why is that? That's 2009, the peak. It just started declining. So it probably been first noticeable in applications in about 2011, 2012. So the end results probably next year.
Yeah, but
next year or the year after.
What's additionally interesting is that, like I said, the way they spun this, I mean, if you look at the title, they are actually minimizing the female victimhood. I don't think they want the people to know this, that women have actually been, that women have been declining in STEM fields. I actually think that this is something that they are concerned that people find out about. Because usually
it would destroy the feminist narrative.
Yeah, it does. Because what the first point we see declines, 1983. The second point we're starting to see declines, 1993. And we're going to start to see declines in the female PhDs as well shortly. So it completely blows up the feminist narrative because things have been getting worse for women in STEM. As feminism strides across its landscape with these exaggerated notions of female victimhood. I mean, she has literally made herself a victim of probabilities, or no, probable, what the hell? Okay. All right. If you're watching this, I think we should go back to the video. If you're watching this, could you explain to me, and I'm going to get back to the video. It's just going to take a moment, but I want you to explain, maybe you can do this, Teal dear, because it's baffling as hell. I want you to explain what the fuck she's a victim of. And let's just go through it really quick. I'm pretty sure it started about here.
Are benign.
Okay, now it's a little bit further back. Sorry about that.
These types of discrimination events are benign in that they're not intentional, but they're probabilistic.
What the fuck is she saying she's a discrimination of? Like, she's giving no details. The discrimination events are benign but probabilistic. What the fuck does that mean? Does anybody have a fucking clue what the fuck discrimination she's describing? Tilder?
I have no idea. To me, it's just, it's
Gibberish?
not,
Gibberish.
it's not, yeah, it's not something that the words that she's using make no sense in that order. You're saying it's basically just something that is related to probability. That's all something being probabilistic is, just something that is related to probability. So it's like, okay, so you're going to receive, so you are a victim of something that is benign, which is good for you, which somehow hurts women, and it's something that is probably going to happen.
It's incoherent.
It means nothing. It means nothing because she's not given a specific, okay, this is the thing which you are probably going to be a victim of. You will probably be disadvantaged in this way.
So
like there's nothing like that. It's if you want to say, it's like you will have, say, probabilistic discrimination in the NBA if you are underneath 6 foot in height. You know, what that would mean, it's like, it's probable that you will be negatively impacted by that because, you know, being over 6 foot tall to be a basketball player is pretty much a necessity. So you will probably be disadvantaged if you're doing that. You know, it's a benign thing insofar as it's not malicious intent, but what you've done in that particular circumstance is you have provided something concrete by which to measure the potential or the probabilistic nature of the discrimination that you'll face. She has failed to provide that, which is why her sentence means nothing.
Yeah, it's gibberish. Okay, but this is what's happening. They are advancing gibberish like this in service of advancing the idea that women are victims of these fields, of the culture within these fields. They're advancing this notion through this gibberish that actually makes absolutely no logical or coherent sense. It isn't even an anecdote. But they're advancing this notion that women are victims through these fields. What do you think's going to happen if you tell, I don't know, people with polka dot shirts, don't go down that alley? There are muggers who will probabilistically, you know, the probabilistic I mean, it'll be a benign mugging, but it'll be probabilistic. So don't go down that. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to avoid the alley. And then 20 years from now, when feminists like this and feminist initiatives like this get the number of women in STEM to have from what it is now, they're gonna cry patriarchy some more. They are manufacturing this problem. And I think, okay, conspiracy tinfoil hat time. I think the reason why they're minimizing is some sort. It's like a playbook out of 1984. The chocolate ration has increased from 3 ounces to 2.5. The chocolate ration has increased from 3 ounces to 2.5. It's something like that. They are trying to pretend this history is gone. They're trying to pretend that the decline didn't happen. That's why they spun the title in defiance of their usual activity, which is to emphasize female victimhood. They de-emphasized it here because they don't want people to know that this is what they're fucking doing. Feminists are chasing women out of STEM. They're gobbling them up for their fucking narrative, and they're shitting them out. And they don't want anybody to know that that's what they're doing, because then they can turn around and blame it on men when it's them and their rhetoric and these vague wibbly wobbly, oh, you might be in danger. You might be in danger. Completely unsubstantiated by anything, not even a fucking anecdote. Just her saying, oh, it's benign but probabilistic. What the fuck? Gibberish, whatever you want to call it. This fucking gibberish. I feel better.
Good.
Okay. Banana?
First of all, kill echoes.
Oh, okay.
And second of all, maybe I'm getting too hung up on the word probabilistic here. But the probabilistic logic is basically something that works on sort of probability theory. And the point of probability theory is you normally use it to analyze something really simple, like a game of chance, like rolling a dice. And you would use probabilistic logic to work out every single thing that affects how, say, you roll a dice. Like, how dense is the air around it? How much friction is there going to be as it hits the table? All of these things are influencing factors on which side that dice is going to fall on. You know, how much are you spinning it when you throw it? How much force do you throw it with? And so on and so forth. Theoretically, with a decent application of probability theory, you could work out every single one of those variables mathematically to determine every single time what side that dice will land on. And you can't really have a probabilistic thing in sociology. I don't see how that could be, because humans are not mathematical equations. By the very nature of humanity, people have the ability to do things unexpected. So trying again, maybe I'm just using like the scientific mathematical actual what probabilistic theory or what probability theory is, what probabilistic logic is, and trying to apply it, because I have a feeling that she might be using some sort of bullshit wishy-washy social science bullshit appropriation of it. But you can't really use like mathematical probabilistic theory on a social setting. It just doesn't really work. But this is why social sciences aren't really sciences. And maybe that's just me getting a bit hung up on that, but it's just a really weird choice of word.
Well, I think she's just trying to make her sound smart.
Yeah, that's the thing about social sciences. It really fucking bugs me, especially like feminist academia. Like, okay, time for a rant, off topic, but fuck it, I'm getting this out because I need to. I am fucking sick of social scientists and feminist academics using really fucking big words for no reason whatsoever. If you've ever actually spoken to a scientist, or you've ever had a scientist try to explain anything to anyone, they will always break it down to the most simple words possible. Like, you know, and this is something which I try to do on my channel as well, because science is my thing, but you will always try and break things down into the simplest words possible, simplest metaphors possible, because that's how people understand things. If you're not able to explain a really in-depth concept to like a 5-year-old, then you don't understand it well enough. And feminist academia, the social sciences that feminism use, refuse to do that, because they can't. They have to obfuscate everything behind really big words that makes it impenetrable to people who aren't in the clique. This is why whenever they talk about things like even intersectionality theory, you know, which is basically the feminist privilege theory dynamic, it's a really big word for a really simple concept. The simple concept is different people have shit lives for different reasons. That's intersectionality theory in a nutshell. But what do feminists call it? Well, it's the interlocking social matrix of domination, discrimination, privilege, and oppression. They can't describe it any other way. They have to use ridiculous language to describe everything they're doing in order to make it sound like something more than it is.
Yeah.
Because that's how they get people to believe them. It's like, oh, well, it sounds impressive, therefore it must be true.
Well,
and
yeah.
It fucking pisses me off that they do that shit. Because that's what this woman's doing. It's like, I'm going to use all of these really big words. I'm not really going to use them in a way that actually makes any fucking sense whatsoever, because there's no simple way of explaining it, because what I'm explaining is bullshit. And this is why it's like, oh, well, the discrimination is benign, but probabilistic. It's like, no, it's not probabilistic. You cannot apply probability theory to what you're talking about. It doesn't fucking work. And you really cannot have benign discrimination, like benign bigotry. These sorts of things don't exist. If you are treating someone better, then that's not like a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be, you know, in the too many cooks spoil the broth sort of way, but generally it's just, it does my fucking head in that they have to they just zhuzh up all of their concepts with such ridiculous, flowery language, so much of it which is just borrowed from actual science, because they want to feel like they're doing something actually scientific. Like they want to feel important and to feel really smart, like they're really contributing something to the rigors of science. But all they're doing is just appropriating terminology from actual sciences in order to bamboozle people who don't know any better.
Pretty much.
On that note, I think it's time for an interlocking hand palming of banana fruiting something or other,
Shall we just start again?
better known as a banana.
Okay.
That means that at every single decision point,
Okay, fuck this. And I know we got further than this.
then a comparable male column.
She just said that women are more vulnerable, which is, what a surprise, right?
And
of course
when we look at the numbers, they cry for.
Ooh, we're gonna look at some numbers. That's a good step.
We did look at numbers.
Yeah, we did, but now we're gonna look at her numbers.
No, we're not.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't actually.
No, I'm just calling it now. No, we're not.
Okay. Well, all right.
I'm willing to bet.
Okay, I'll take the optimistic that maybe she'll pull something out of her ass. Like, it probably won't be scientific in the slightest, but maybe it'll be something other than benign and probabilistic discrimination.
They cry for an explanation.
Cry for an what cries for an explanation? For the benign probabilistic discrimination that is also benign. That cries for an explanation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that we start as undergraduates now with as a 50-50 distribution of women in many of the hard sciences? And
okay.
And there is this progressive attrition.
What's really interesting is, I think the bigger question is why why women have just bailed out of computer science since 1983. Like that. Why are you talking about this? Aren't you the least bit, whatever.
Of women to the high ranks. So that when we get to the tenured ranks of a university, what happens to all the women? Well, it's easy to give explanations about, life's complexities, family, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, that's nuanced, actually. It's not easy. It's not.
Okay, yeah, let's just hand wave away the fact that there are. Oh, yeah, it's really easy to provide explanations for why patterns happen. Well, in that case, it doesn't really cry for an explanation. That is your explanation.
No.
Why do patterns exist across any sort of population? Because people make choices and there are patterns in choices that people make. The more choices that you give people, the more obvious the patterns are going to be. It's that fucking simple. If you have 10 people and you say to 10 people, okay, you can all sit and watch TV for the next hour, 100% of people will sit and watch TV for an hour. If you have 10 people and you say you have a choice of watching TV for an hour or reading a book for an hour, you're going to start getting different patterns emerging. If you say, okay, you've got 10 people, you can go bowling for an hour, watch TV for an hour, or read a book for an hour, you're going to have different groups going to different things, and patterns are going to emerge. Yeah. It's not difficult.
No, it's and what's amazing too is it cries out for an explanation, and I wouldn't call those explanations easy. They're just nuanced and they're reflective of actual reality. And also we just saw statistics that show that women are not losing, even though that probably the PhDs will decline in the future, at least at this moment in time, there is no pipeline leaking. Which is really, like, that's really fucking hilarious, because I would think the real concern is the fact that computer science hemorrhaged women between 1983 and now. But apparently this is the real concern. I mean, I would think that's the real concern, considering that bachelors and PhDs usually translate to jobs and more money than, or sorry, no, bachelors and masters translate to jobs and more money than PhDs. But I guess that's incidental. Yeah, okay, moving on.
That doesn't explain it. If you ask the women,
Okay, this is a complete.
Of course it doesn't. If you ask anyone, why didn't you achieve this? Most people are not going to say, because I chose to do something that meant that I didn't do it. People have a remarkable tendency of externalizing the reason that they didn't achieve something that they wanted to do. So it's really funny that when you ask people why they failed at doing something, that they don't say, because I chose to do something different or because I just wasn't good enough.
What a surprise. You give women an excuse for failure, and like any other human being, they take it. As opposed to just reflecting on the fact that they're, but you know what? There's no evidence for this assertion, I assume, unless there was like links to a study or something. Jancy.
that started out in the trajectory and didn't make it.
What? Okay, let me just go through that one again.
That doesn't explain it. If you ask the women that started out in the trajectory and didn't make it.
What about, do you ever ask the men who started out in the trajectory and didn't make it? I mean, if we had an entire body or entire so-called body of academic research into how the matriarchy is keeping men down, do you think that men who failed would say, you know what, I just wasn't cut out for it, or I didn't do the work, or I'd just rather take care of my sproggins? Do you think that they would say that, or would they say, oh, the matriarchy done it? Think about that for a second. Shall we continue, or do you want to add to that?
No, I would say go on. I'm actually just reading the transcript of the video on their page just to sort of go along with it and see if actually reading it makes it make any more sense, and it doesn't. So, banana.
Even if a woman does get tenure, for example, she doesn't so often get the endowed chair that is given to the more favored colleagues, which is
Favored? Well, that's a real interestingly loaded term. The more favored colleagues. Huh. And it can't just be that her own decisions about how she apports her time resulted in her being less favored, or so-called favored. Maybe she put the hours in. Maybe she preferred to do more, to deal with more family stuff, which was her choice. Man, that can't possibly have anything to do with it. And also, this is a completely unsighted assertion that men are more favored for these jobs. I would like to see some actual research into that. Or is it just a wibbly wobbly feeling of female victimhood that we're just supposed to believe at face value whenever it's asserted? Well, I don't.
oftentimes.
Well, the thing is, the original premise or the original data is going on the original data. It will be just a feeling. There are just objectively more men working in STEM than there are women. Unsurprisingly, then when you get to the level of going for endowed chairs, which is basically a position that was created at a university and is privately funded by an external source, usually the person who founded the chair or their family, it shouldn't really come as any surprise that there's going to be more men in those positions than women by virtue simply of population. When you have an unbalanced population in something, it's not a surprise when you have that pattern again. But so fundamentally, what we're looking at still is why do some women, or why are women not going into STEM now as much as they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? That's the problem.
Something just
and
occurred.
even then, is it a problem?
Throughout history, if you look at how many male scientists died because of persecution, because they thought differently or they had an innovation or something, look at all of that, and you will notice that very, very few female scientists died due to persecution. I wonder if the same absolute dedication to innovation and scientific exploration that led men to advocate issues that could lead them to die, that kind of dedication, I wonder if that kind of dedication could be an explanation why men are more likely to get in endowed chairs, or however that was stated, to get these kind of this kind of recognition for their dedication. Because if you look at the history of science, it has claimed a lot more male lives in the pursuit of science than female lives. In fact, I don't think there are any women who were killed, female scientists who were killed because of persecution for the things that they were advancing. I can be wrong, but I'm definitely sure.
There's inevitably going to be some. It's just that we don't know who they are. I would say that to say that there are none would be ridiculous, but there's just going to be such a minute number that we've probably never heard of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we probably would have heard of them if they were, but I don't want to say none because absolutes usually aren't correct, but
yeah,
consider the relative number of men who have advanced ideas and innovations at the expense of their own lives, and what kind of dedication that represents to science versus the relative lack of women who have ever done the same thing. And consider that probably hasn't changed. The dedication that men show to science probably hasn't changed since those early, very dangerous days. There's still going to be a separate dedication, and it's not going to be due to patriarchal oppression or benign discrimination or whatever the hell you're talking about. It's probably going to be due to the fact that men perceive their value more in what they do than who and what they are or how they're viewed. Consider that. Okay, banana.
Also, one final note on endowed chairs and professorships. In the beginning, she complained that traditional masculine things, which is basically anything that has a hierarchy, and she's claiming that her research unit is this glorious, totally not Marxist, horizontal worker cooperative. If you are in a glorious horizontal worker cooperative, you would not have endowed chairs, because endowed chairs are awarded to members of the faculty who excel in research or in teaching or in some other faculty. They have to be someone who has excelled and proven themselves to be worthy of a position of higher authority. You can't have that in a voluntary worker cooperative where everyone is supposedly equal.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you're saying, oh, I want everyone to be the same, but then you're complaining when women aren't given a special position. It's like, well, in that case, you want a masculine environment where hierarchy exists, because you can't have. I mean, again, we go back to the social versus formal hierarchy. Yeah, you could have social recognition within your voluntary horizontal cooperative, but you couldn't have an official post that provided you with any extra power. The only way you could have that is in a hierarchical system, which you don't like because they are masculine. Just a thought.
Yeah. She wants to be the leader, but she doesn't want there to be leaders. Banana.
Indeed.
Men with endowed chairs have better salary support because they have money from the endowed chair. The woman doesn't. And so even
women could get an endowed chair. All an endowed chair means is that they're being paid additional funding from an outside source of the university. Get yourself sponsored by anyone. That's all it is, basically. It's just private sponsorship to do what you're doing. A woman could do that.
Seems really chipper. You know, just seems really happy and smug.
Yeah.
Just a little bit smug.
highest rank.
She looks a little smug.
It's just like, yeah, but women don't have this. It's like, okay, we'll get more women in STEM, and the proportion of women on endowed chairs will probably increase. Whatever we're doing, you know, as of the past sort of 10 years, or in the cases of computer sciences, nearly 40 years now, that's been pushing them out of STEM, maybe we should look at reversing some of that if you want this trend to change. And what has been happening, what has been rising, what social movements and what social attitudes have been rising in the past 30, 40 years, and especially in the last 10 years or 20 years now, where every science is down in women. What happened in the 90s? Are we seeing the correlation anywhere? Oh dear. We have data. She doesn't. So again, I'm not going to say correlation necessitates causation, but you know, when you have a shit ton of correlation, it becomes very hard to start saying that there is no causation or no bearing whatsoever.
Well, how
Again,
about
there might be none. There might be none, and I might be looking at this completely all wrong. But it does seem very strange that these events coincide very, very closely.
it's also there's another loophole. There's another wrinkle in all of this. When it comes to STEM and keeping women in STEM and women being in STEM, Iran and places like Malaysia are doing better than us, if you can believe it. So there's another data point to add in there. So there's something that we do in our culture to women, potentially to women, since the 1980s, and in particular since the 1990s. There's something that we've been advancing in our culture that's making women flee computer science and starting to flee other hard sciences. And yet in Iran and Malaysia, or in really, really conservative parts of Asia, women are doing significantly better in staying in STEM. Isn't it astounding? Like, what is it that they're doing right and we're doing wrong? What is Iran doing right and we're doing wrong in this issue? And I'm being slightly facetious here, but you're concerned about my facetiousness?
No, I'm just agreeing. It's just we've seen this and we know all about it. It's
Sweden is having the same problem.
well, yeah, everywhere's having, but it's something which has been nicknamed on the internet the Norwegian gender paradox, or just the gender paradox, which is basically, and the reason for the Norwegian part is because it was first observed in Norway, and that is when you give women a shitload of choice, patterns will emerge. The more choice you have, the more likely there is to become a pattern of people gravitating towards certain things. And you will often find that there are certain mental profiles who will go towards certain things. If you only have one job, if you have a really bizarre village where there is only one job and the job is gather berries, everyone will gather berries. If you live in a village where there's suddenly two jobs, one of which is gather berries and the other of which is wrestle tigers, you're going to see a pattern emerge. And unsurprisingly, certain mental profiles, as well as certain physical attributes, you will notice patterns between all of these things and those two jobs. And again, if you add a third job, guess what happens even more? More mental profiles and more different physical profiles gravitate towards those things in different rates, but there will always be patterns. And this is the thing that these people don't realize. You give people choices, and the more choice you have, the more pronounced a pattern is. The fewer choices you have, which is in instances like Iran and China and these places like that, where there is less choice, because people don't have as much choice, they have to go into these things.
Okay. The other thing is, I would say that might be nullified, that hypothesis that if you give women more choice, they're less likely to go into STEM. Consider that in the United States, there was a fairly large social support for women being homemakers about the time that they were starting to become higher or increasing their involvement in STEM. So women had those choices back then. They just didn't, for whatever reason, and the increase of degrees in STEM means that there would have been an increase of women, of young girls in primary, secondary, and high school, middle school, those young girls choosing to go into those fields. So this would have had to have started in the 60s. At the same time, when there was support for them to also become homemakers. So they had the choice. And yet at that time, they chose to go into STEM. And now they're choosing not to. And it's just, it may be that because when you give women more choice, that they just choose to do more feminine pursuits. Or it could also be that in Norway and Sweden and other Western cultures, there's a particular social movement to get women to view themselves as victims of society and more vulnerable than men, exceedingly more vulnerable than men. And that social movement may be actually destroying women's achievement in these fields as a direct result of teaching them to view themselves as being victims. It's a possibility, yeah, and that because places like Iran don't shove women into these psychological burqa of victim, surprisingly, women still they go into STEM, or even in Asia, which is probably a better example. In these incredibly traditional Asian societies, there is plenty of women in STEM. Maybe it's because they haven't imported something yet. Something that teaches women to have a chip on their shoulder about being victims of society. And maybe that's what's making them, when you say to women, oh, you're a victim of society, you're a victim of these fields, of these groups of people, maybe that's preventing women from going into those fields or associating with those groups of people, or even having the mental wherewithal to deal with all of the difficulty involved in taking a STEM course. Okay. Shall we banana?
Yes.
All right.
At the highest ranks, it is more difficult, I think, for women scientists. If you love the science, and if that's what you're born
Again, I'd like to point out and throughout history how many men have died for loving their science. But, you know, whatever. I mean, why doesn't anybody ever point that out? Science, the pursuit of science for men, it required men to die to pursue science. Female scientists rarely suffered the same kind of fate as many male scientists, advancing these innovative notions of reality against establishment. You know, and if science had required women to die in order for it to be advanced in its early stages, it probably never would have happened. Anyway. Banana?
Banana.
To do, then don't be discouraged by any of this. Just go do it.
Don't be discouraged. Well, I would agree. I agree with her. Don't be discouraged by this incomprehensible gibberish, young women, and this complete lack of any kind of support for what this interesting human creature is asserting. Don't be discouraged by it, because anything that is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So if you're a budding female scientist, dismiss this because it has no evidence. And why the hell does she have a piece of glitter there? Glitter really,
an excellent question.
Glitter really is like the most persistent substance on the earth. Anyway, banana.
Somehow there'll be a way.
Oh, for fuck's sake. What a fucking victim complex. Somehow there'll be a way. Ah. She needs like an orchestra of tiny violins. And so maybe this is, yeah, you know, I was interested about what you said about failure. I mean, could this be a way of excusing one's own personal and individual failure and actually making yourself feel better for achieving very little? Because you did it with, you were climbing that hill with 500 pounds on your back and men were in anti-gravity boots. All right. Banana?
I would say so.
Sometimes you have to learn when not to be too much of a lady. So if you have to kick ass, just go do it.
Or if you just have to whine about non-existent peas, ghost peas, tachyon peas, peas everywhere, little peas all underneath my mattress, I can't sleep. Fucking. Like, how is this? You have asserted that women are victims. You have given no evidence. You haven't even managed to make an anecdotal argument. Like, oh, this happened in my life. Unless you want to call this vague assertion of a benign discrimination, benign probabilistic discrimination as an example of the discrimination you faced. Okay, you have done nothing to assert your shit. So basically, you're just asserting, you're lying. Unless you have actual evidence, you are making a false accusation about the community that you are part of. And you are asserting it to women and girls who might be interested in joining your community. You're like a dragon on a hoard of gold, whispering shit into people's ears. I don't know if that doesn't even make sense. Whatever. It's like, if you are wrong, if you have no evidence for your assertion, you are the problem. You are the problem, not your colleagues. You.
That's what women are going to have to do. They're going to have to face that every once in a while, that you just sometimes got to be tougher than you are.
By uncritically asserting completely unfounded, not even by an anecdote, bullshit about your victimhood. It isn't tough to have a chip on your shoulder.
I don't.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Just a second. I apologize.
Touch it. Excellent. Yeah, I don't get this where she's going with this. It's like, okay, women just need to get on with STEM and actually do things and do all of this stuff. Okay, why then did you start with the assertion without any evidence whatsoever that it's like, oh, you're going to face all of this discrimination and all of this negative stuff, but you just have to get on and fucking do it. It's like, well, why would you start with that ridiculous assertion then? Why don't you start, if you want to get more women into STEM, with the whole, hey, STEM is fucking awesome, and here's why. And look at the rising number of women in STEM. Look at how many women there are in, say, the sciences relating to biology. There's a lot of women in medical research. There's a lot of women in medical research. There's a lot of women in nursing. There's a lot of women in social care. There's a lot of women in psychology. There's a lot of women in all of those parts of STEM. Why didn't you start with that and just say, well, this is a great environment for you to be in. Come and do it. And why not start with the whole, whenever women go into STEM, they are exceptionally sought after. And they are exceptionally sought after. We know this because we have had studies that show that women have up to a 2-to-1 advantage of being hired over a man. In a study that was done, a hiring study that lasted, I believe it was about 6 years. Economics was the least advantageous to be a woman because it was a 1-to-1 hiring ratio, but it peaked up to 2-to-1 in favor of women. Why don't you start with that and then go on with all of the other medical science and just say, look, there's great, you can do all of this. Why not do that? Why do you have to start with the negative?
Because that's the point. I don't think it is about encouraging women into science. It's about continuing to discourage women and then blame patriarchy. This has got to be the biggest and silliest racket I've ever seen. That's my opinion. I think it's a racket. I think they're justifying themselves by creating the problem that they say is, and they can simply blame it on men. It's like, blame it on the dog. No, I didn't fart, the dog did. Because everybody knows this, this kind of shit's what men do, keeping the women's down. Cackling, tying them to freaking train tracks and twirling your mustaches. That's what men do. That's just what they do. Everybody knows it. And so they can do this. They can advance shit that actually puts women in a position of not wanting to go into these fields. So why would you? You think you're going to be persecuting these fields? Why would you? You think you're going to have to deal with all this shit? Why would you go in? So they do this stuff, and then they turn around and blame it on men, because blaming it on men is just, it's always been a thing. Men are just to blame. It's always made sense to us.
Because Nobel Prize winners make sexist jokes in their speeches.
Yeah.
Oh no, wait, they make disparaging jokes about themselves. Sorry. But when feminists listen to it, it's because they hate women.
Yes, always. Okay, we're in the home stretch here.
It's important for institutions to value their women, let their women know that they are valued.
What the fuck? So essentially, institutions need to value women in a way that they don't value men, or we just assume that institutions value men.
We need to coddle women.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. We need to give women preferential treatment and super duper comfortable environments, and we need to make them feel valued, because they're not at the moment, apparently, even though they are the preferred sex in hiring.
Well, they're the preferred sex also in terms of, they're the preferred sex when it comes to grants and scholarships. They are the preferred sex when it comes to hiring. I mean, in every way, institutions discriminate against men and for women. The government gives women more in terms of services than it does men. So the thing is that every single institution in our society prefers to benefit women over men. Every single one of them. And men achieve despite this. And they achieve despite this because they're simply more motivated to achieve. Because women are getting shit just for being women. When you get shit just for being a woman, you're not motivated to achieve anything. And then you look at the fact that men are motivated to achieve something in order to get the shit that women just get. And they say, oh my God, men are so fucking privileged. We gotta privilege women more. This is like never ending. This fucking mental loop that the human race is caught in. It's enough to just, it's enough to despair. Okay, but we're banana?
Yeah.
And to put supports in place.
They're already in place. There are no scholarships for male students, except for one, Milo, and people are trying to get it declared illegal to actually have a scholarship for a white cis man. They're trying to make that illegal. I mean, there's so much institutional discrimination that benefits women. And yet, because men rise above it, they rise above the institutional discrimination against them, and they achieve, probably because they're not given anything by the institutional discrimination, and they achieve despite the institutions not wanting to give them anything. And you sit here and you say, we got to discriminate against men more.
That allow ambitious, talented.
Saying that a woman's achievement is going to be the result of other people giving her shit because she's a woman. Not all girls and women are ambitious and talented. If you want women to win big, there's got to be women who lose big, just like men. Are you going to be able to handle that? If you want women to win an entire, you just imagine a scenario. Everybody puts something in a pot, only one person wins. They win big, but everyone else loses. That's where men are. All the men put it in a pot. One guy wins big, everyone else loses. Women don't do that.
She wants a situation where if a woman tries, she can't fail. That's what I think she's getting at. She's sort of saying, like, if a woman is ambitious and all that stuff, we need all of these supports in place to make sure she succeeds. It's moving rapidly towards a point where she might as well just be saying, if a woman wants to do something, she must achieve it. And everyone must help her achieve it, regardless.
She must be given it. Well, that's not ambitious.
Yeah, you can't be ambitious if you are going to be given everything just as soon as you want it.
And the other thing is if every woman achieves everything that she wants just because she asks for it and institutions are required to give it to her.
She's not the one doing the work then.
Oh, she's not the one doing the work, but no woman wins big. How can a woman emerge as a leader in that? They can't.
Yeah. You cannot be a leader of people unless you actually are seen and known to have overcome adversity and actually be someone worth listening to.
I mean,
so if you are given everything, no one is going to respect you as a leader because you haven't earned that.
But she'll expect people to respect women, even though the institutions give them everything that they expect. The institutions are responsible for giving women everything that they want, but not men. So we have this incredible value that we give women. Women should get whatever they want because they're women. And then we complain that men achieve more individually when they're not given anything. Why do you think they do? Because they're motivated to. Because they're not given anything. Oh, it's just a snake eating its own tail with these people. And like I said, if you want women to win big, you got to accept that they lose big. Lose big. That they get cast in the categories of cowards, deadbeats, failures. That they be spit on as much as men are when they fail. And that they have no excuses for their failures. That's what motivates people not to fail. That they know that they are the only ones responsible if they fail. Then they motivate not to fail.
Part of the motivation to not fail is that you know that failure will be a bad thing for you. That's why so many men do not want to fail. Because if they fail, there is a negative repercussion. If a woman fails, if there's no repercussion, then why would she be scared of like failing then? Why would she be motivated to do anything? It doesn't matter if you fail if there's no negative repercussion.
Yeah. So there's no motivation to achieve.
Yeah, it's like, okay, here, let's just do what we always do and reduce everything to the point of absurdity. You have to be able to run 100 meters in 20 seconds or nothing happens. Cool, I'm gonna eat these kettle chips and go watch a movie. Fuck you. Okay, you have to run 100 meters in 20 seconds or I'm going to stab you in the eye. Guess who's getting on a treadmill?
Yeah. It's you can men have to earn their value because institutions will give women shit just for being women. And because men have to earn their value, they achieve more. Period. And then individuals of a certain merit, such as yourself, come around and say because men are given nothing for being men, nothing, no scholarships, no special perks, no money, no government handouts. And when they fail, they are subject to some really harsh penalties. You look at this situation, you see that men achieve because they have no fucking choice. That's how they retain value in our society, whereas women just have value for existing. You see that men achieve, and you turn around and you tell everyone to value women more. You're an idiot. How the fuck did you get... I assume that you're a professor. How did you fucking get hired? You can't follow simple logic. And you think some sort of withering postmodernist intellectual bullshit can stand in the face of an actual argument, actual evidence, or even a fucking anecdote. I'm subject to probabilistic benign discrimination. That's what this whole thing is hinging on. All of her assertions, everything in this piece is hinging on one 10-second bit of gibberish. You know, the only reason you are a professor is probably because you're a woman. Banana?
Possibly. I mean, I'm actually because that echo.
Okay, I apologize. I have to go through a series of...
Okay, there we go. Yeah. What?
Hello?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's just still happening and you had the mute thing. Yeah, no, because I'm me and this is what I do. I've just decided to look her up. The interesting thing about her is she's supposed to be a neuroscientist, apparently. So presumably she would then be aware of things like biological differences between male brains and female brains and how these sorts of things do have influences on behavior, because she's supposed to be a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist, apparently. But she doesn't seem to understand these differences or know anything about them. But what's rather interesting is she's complaining about like women not having tenured positions and all of that stuff. If you actually just happen to read her CV, which is available online, when was her graduation? Let's see if I can find that out. I think it was back in the 2000s or something. No, it wasn't in the 2000s. That's administrative positions. No. Her career and academic appointments included being an associate professor, tenured. So keep in mind, she was complaining about women not getting tenureship. 1987, when she got that. Clearly all of the sexism. She has a current active grant for a direct amount total of $2 million. where she's studying the mechanism of interpersonal social communication. Past grants, there's one here for $500,000, another one before that for $370,000, another one before that for $3 million, $2 million before that, another $2 million before that. I'm sorry, where is this discrimination, and how are you not getting any money? And these are all like
money for?
Well, these are all in the year 2000s. I will actually just I'll link it to you in the chat. Maybe it'll be worth looking at the end. She has been on a lot of very well-funded grant projects, like a lot of them. Now, obviously, all of this money isn't going to be going to her. It's across the entire research department doing that thing. But yet, she's been on a lot of very, very well-paid things throughout her career.
Okay.
I just find it bizarre that she's then sitting here talking about how women are discriminated against. And yeah, education, bachelor's of science, she did hers in 1969. Master's done in 1971. PhD done in 1977. So 1977, she became a doctor. 1987, she got a tenured position. 10 years. 10 years to tenure in a society that like hates women and discriminates against women. Really? No.
I just don't think she gives a shit about the women and girls she's dissuading from going into science. I mean, if she wanted to persuade them, she would say, hey, look at me. Look at what I've achieved.
Yeah.
Instead, she alludes to some bizarre... She alludes to nothing.
Yeah, what I would rather do, I would rather show women and girls her CV. Because this is a woman, and this is what she's achieved. Because there's a lot going on here, and actually some of her stuff actually looks kind of legit. Obviously, I haven't looked at any of the papers directly. They could be total garbage, but I might do that later just for fun. But, you know, there is a lot of stuff here. If you just handed a girl or a woman like this CV and was like, yeah, this is a female neuroscientist. She graduated in 1977. As opposed to this sort of wishy-washy, oh well, women they kind of have a sort of vague.
Maybe like just I feel it in parts of my anatomy that this possibly could be something that might eventually, probabilistically, benignly, but also discriminatively, might actually possibly and just go like I have a vague intuition that something bad might happen to you if you come into this field. Not like me. Great things happen to me, but to you.
You will be so discriminated against that just like me in 10 years, you could be in a tenured position at a university.
Dude. Okay.
Yeah, tell me about all the discrimination that you faced in your career.
Ah, indeed. Okay. Let's finish this shit.
Women to contribute as best they can.
As best they can. Okay, I'm not going to go any further with this. I'm done. I'm not going to do the ending credits here. I don't think that's going to benefit anyone.
It will provide.
All right. Okay. So we're off the echo track. Do you want me to show the CV?
I think it might just be nice, just so that people can see it. Just so they know, like, look at how discriminated against this woman is. This is something that's publicly available. It comes off of her website. As you can see there, Joy Hirsch. Graduated Columbia University, New York. Did psychology. I don't quite know how she's a neuroscientist when she's studying psychology. I'm assuming that's because of her bachelor degree, which was life sciences. But she seems to have gone into just putting it into psychology, which is the slightly more questionable branch of STEM, because psychology is very questionable in its actual scientific merit. It can be scientifically rigorous, but in a lot of cases it isn't, and is just used to push narratives. But yeah, look at that. Her first tenured professorship was 1987. And she's got a lot just scroll through. She's had quite a few tenured positions.
Okay, well, what's the average time to tenure?
I'm not sure actually how long it takes for people to get to those.
What's the average tenure track duration? Probably highly feed. I always thought it was a standard of 6 years, so maybe she has something.
Yeah, the standard. Just quickly Google it up. It seems to be about 6 years. It's usually
Okay.
6 years, but it can be extended.
Mm-hmm. Or at least they say that you can apply in your 6th year. It doesn't mean you necessarily will get it. So here's something I've heard. A very top school department that is fine with promoting everybody to associate professors, but the real tenure decision comes about 3 years after that, and you really have to be an international star to be granted tenure. So in effect, the tenure track is about 9 years. Huh. Okay. So, on average, you're up for tenure in about 6 years. And then on average, you granted it in about 9 years. So she's pretty much right on. And the thing is that actually it was 8 years. Because if it's 2079 that she got her associate professor, she got 1979 associate professor, she got tenure. In 1987, that's 8 years, not 10.
Okay, so yeah, she did pretty well then. Yep.
Yeah.
All that discrimination.
Definitely. Definitely. At least it's working.
Science hates women, don't you know?
Yeah.
That she can just get tenure in the pretty standard time for people who choose to go into academia, as opposed to the private sector where you get so much more money.
All right. So now that we've proven that this individual was hugely discriminated against.
Very unsuccessful. Absolutely kept down by the man. If you just scroll down to some of those grant histories, look at some of those numbers, especially for her percentage of effort.
Percent effort. Well, maybe that was the total grant, so it wasn't her.
Yeah, I know this is a total grant. It's the amount going to the total of the research team that she's a part of. But yeah, she's been getting, the departments that she's been in have been paying pretty well. They've been doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's so discriminated against that she's, doing okay in regards to the amount of funding that her departments have been getting. Obviously, all that money doesn't go to her directly. I want to make that clear for anyone listening. It is just to the general organization. It's the sort of amount of money that is allocated to their section. But yeah, no, wow. She seems to have had a quite nicely funded career. She tenured herself in a timely fashion. So this is totally a woman who you want to listen to, because she has clearly faced all of the oppression.
All of it.
Every single part of it.
All of our oppressions belong to her.
Absolutely. Undeniable.
Okay. I think with that sarcastic final, I think we should maybe wind down to the impasse. I wish I fucking had a grant of $2 million. My God.
You never know. If you shill hard enough, it could happen.
Oh, hey, I gotta launch off of that platform. Okay, so once again, Honey Badger Radio is sending Antonio, who's our filmmaker, out to cover various events. Right now, he is concluded an interview with Gregory Allen Elliott, who is the part of the infamous Freedom of Tweets situation. And in March, we're going to go to the South by Southwest panel, and hopefully South by Southwest Save Point panel put on by the Open Gaming Society. And hopefully we'll interview Mercedes Carrera. It's looking pretty positive for that one. And then after that, in April, we actually have a new event that we've been invited to cover. The SPJ Airplay panel number 2. Which is not actually put on by the Society of Professional Journalists, but will be sponsored by them. And we've been invited to cover that as well. So if you want to see coverage of these issues that isn't completely one-sided and painting gamergaters and individuals such as ourselves that advocate for men's issues, don't want to include Teal Deer, but I mean myself. I'll you know, whether or not he identifies in that area, I'm not going to get into. And sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Anyway,
What?
so sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm getting off the spot immediately. You keep going.
All right. Okay, I'm going to keep going. But I advocate for men's issues. I also advocate against censorship in media. So I'm very much for presenting these events as they actually happened and as the issues were actually presented at the events. So if you want to make sure that these events don't go down the memory hole or don't get smeared by mainstream media or establishment media, then please go to feedthebadger.com and throw some shekels in the hat so we can ensure favorable, or not favorable, but at least neutral coverage. Thank you. And thank you, Teal Deer, for coming on. I really appreciate that.
It has been a pleasure, as always.
Yep. Yes, definitely. And I guess good night or good evening or afternoon or wherever you are.